Hello and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Building Magazine in association with Dries and Summer. My name is Chloe McCulloch and I'm editor at Building Magazine, and this is all part of Digital Building Week. But the topic for discussion today is building smarter and greener. So we're going to be looking at how smart buildings and technology can support businesses and employees to return back to work, and I think we'll probably cover a host of other issues as well. So here to help us navigate all of that, we have Philip Ratcliffe, Managing Director of Dries and Summer. You can't see him, unfortunately, because his webcam is not working with our system, but he is there, I promise you, and he can share his screen and can be heard. So welcome, Philip. We also have Matthew Marson, UK Sector Director for Manufacturing and Technology at Arcadis. Again, you can't see Matthew, but he is there and he is able to speak and share his screen. We have Rory Bergen, partner and specialising in sustainable futures at HTA Design. And his webcam is working, and we have Andrew Pryke, Managing Director at BAM, who is also here with a lovely bike behind him. So welcome to my panel. Before we get started, I just want to remind the audience that during the webinar you can post questions to the panel and they will try to answer as many of those as they can once they finish their presentations. So do post questions as we go and we will get to those. Also, you may like to know that the presentations will be available on demand once the live version is finished. So I think we've covered everything. We are going to start off with Andrew. So I'm going to let him share his screen, and Rory and I will turn off our webcams and hand over to Andrew. So hopefully this is going to work now. Over to you, Andrew.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes, we can. It just needs to go into presentation mode, if you can.
Okay, how's that?
Perfect, thank you very much. Over to you, Andrew.
No problem, thank you very much. I realise, thank you, Chloe, for reminding me that I've moved rooms. Most people have interesting books behind them. Unfortunately, I have a bike. Well, fortunate for me, but I'm not sure it's as interesting. But thank you, Chloe, for that. Good afternoon, my name's Andrew Pryke, as Chloe said. I'm an architect, managing director at the 100+ multi-design consultancy wing in BAM. Part of the wider group, we deliver buildings, property development, construction and FM. I'm also head of digital strategy and sit on our international board, which is a worldwide business board for digital and DFMA. Part of these images here, I've been fortunate to have designed and led many landmark buildings worldwide and with renowned practices. I've been fortunate and lucky in that position here. I've also been very lucky as part of BAM in the last 8 years to be a part of the many landmark worldwide developments around the country, which I'm sure you've seen in many articles on Building Magazine. I won't go too much into those. Today, really, I suppose one of the key elements I see is about data, and people talk about data, and I was trying to avoid data is the new oil, but I've just said it anyway. Data is transforming a somewhat low productive industry in construction, but I think it's a case of how we analyze this and how we use that data is becoming more and more important as we move forward. Just looking at the aviation industry, and many of you will know, Rolls-Royce monitors every engine it sells. It's powered by the hour. It has sensors that inform Rolls-Royce how that engine is performing and what maintenance it requires while it's in flight. Obviously not much work going on at the moment, but that's the principle that's been around for a while, and it's a different procurement method as well. Tesla, as the image at the front of my presentation showed, have really disrupted the car industry, not only with electric powered vehicles and driverless technology, but also the way it collects data for when you plug your car in at night. It's part of a digital twin that sucks information and data from your car, analyzes all the cars that are plugged in, and then actually tries to look at improvements, and software updates are passed through at the same time automatically into your car. So technology is around in other industries, but in our own industry at home, many of us have got various pieces of technology, kit, Nest, or whatever, whether it's a light switch, whether it's a thermostat, whether it's a camera that's linked to your iPad, phone, or smartwatch. And that shows really the power of that and how you can adjust that remotely and that data, how that becomes very important and valuable. And that expands really to smart cities, smart neighborhoods, whether it's collecting air quality, traffic monitoring for congestion and moving traffic lights, water quality, or just looking at the weather to actually when to turn on the sprinklers to water the parks and gardens. Google have seen the importance of this and actually looking at in Toronto, their smart city initiative that's ongoing. And I myself have also won a World Architectural International Award for looking at the concept of converting Southampton into a smart city, understanding the data, looking at the key issues, and then adjusting that as part of a smart city way forward. Closer to home, King's Cross, London. BAM have designed and built almost 50% of the buildings there. My own team have digitally represented and produced a model of the whole development, Revit models detailed at going inside, outside of those buildings, which means that that can be used as a vehicle for adding smart technology, smart data to that, whether it's the energy performance of the buildings, whether it's when maintenance, how products are performing, and that can be advantage to not only the tenant, the landlord, but obviously visitors and users alike. We're also developing the Edge building in Berlin, which is greener and smarter technologies for the Edge technologies. And that's really building on the so-called smartest building in the world, the Edge building for Deloitte in Amsterdam, where employees use a smart app, allowing them to understand traffic to work, whether they should go into work yet, manage their diaries, book meetings, order lunch, coffee, control heating, lighting, air conditioning, all from one bespoke app. And I know a lot of these things are available, but on one app that becomes bespoke to how you use it. This in turn allowed Deloitte to understand the best way to use the building from an energy point of view, security is actually where areas can be used, etc. on that. Closer to home, back to BAM again. BAM are looking at a retrofit, a building. They build about 400 of these now, retrofit housing solutions for our 50s to 80s housing stock upgrades, are recladding walls, roofs with prefabricated panels, the roof being photovoltaics, and installing new prefabricated energy modules, which you can see on the bottom left there. We're applying these to produce low-cost energy performance houses, and also the houses are all monitored to allow usage for further efficiencies and for the benefit of the whole community.
Andrew, one second, sorry, there's just a little bit of interference on your mic. If you turn it on and off, sometimes that works. Very high tech, I know.
Okay. How's that?
A little bit better. Keep going.
Okay, no problem. Yes, as to extend the off-site zero carbon and digital efficiencies, BAM Design is the joint lead designer for working with the Construction Innovation Hub for a new UK government program to accelerate DFMA and zero carbon through an initiative to create and build a platform DFMA solution to provide further efficiencies to benefit the 6 government departments that procure built assets. This is the program, as you can see on the bottom left, but looking across whether it's offices, prisons, schools, health facilities, etc. So looking to move that forward. And lastly, really, bringing this all to home, we've all heard about the Leesman Index and surveys. Attended a meeting in February where everything was normal at then. And obviously the focus there was that productivity is higher where you have a sustainable environment in the office, but also people have desks, their own desks, etc. So they have a base to work from and they're happier, therefore more productive. Obviously now we're in a totally different situation, and the so-called new normal is where we're working in. And that is where a development what we've looked at in BAM called Smart Tower. And this is the way is addressing the new normal concept, a zero carbon circular economy solution to maximize inner cities using off-site manufacture. The tower is more in line with the American model, creates live, work, play hubs all in one environment. You're not commuting to work, you're remote working, but all those facilities are all in one space. And I suppose then the sensors and data analytics will monitor the building's usage, predict efficiencies, allow occupants to have their own bespoke app in relation to their live, work, play lifestyle. So I suppose the question raising on there is what is that new lifestyle? Are we here now remote working, or is everything getting back to normal? So I'll leave that there and we'll pick it up later. Thank you very much, Chloe.
Thank you. That's a really interesting question to leave us with, and I'm sure we can come back to that in our sort of group conversation. So for now, I'm going to move us on to Rory and just give him the presentation option. Just bear with me one moment. And Rory, that should be across to you. Brilliant.
Okay, thank you, Chloe. Just on the screen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our work really dealing with manufacturing and how we see sort of digital, smarter approach happening as a practice, as a design practice and how we operate. We operate across many disciplines and many different building typologies. And recently we've published a couple of books on the topic, which the audience might like to dip into at some point, on volumetric housing on the one hand and on different typologies of housing, or radical housing on the other. And we've been working on offsite projects with increasing regularity to the point now where it's probably 1/3 or so of the practice's workload of about 200 people. And this sort of explosion is in part digitally enabled and partly because of the sophisticated or more sophisticated nature of manufacturing and contracting that's available to us and to our clients now. And we feel that it's sort of important that we as a sector, the design disciplines really are digitally enabled and capable of providing information to manufacturers and contractors that enable all of this process to happen. The benefits to it that we've seen are are pretty obvious, but it is only delivering perhaps, well, certainly less than 10% of the industry's output, and probably closer to 5%. So there's a long way to go in terms of the adoption of more manufacturing processes in the design sector, and we as designers, I think, have a bit of a job to do to really catch up on somehow of some of the other industries that supply us very well with things like phones and computers and cars and most of the other products that we work with and use on our daily lives. And many of the benefits of those processes in terms of quality and speed of research and development and in terms of sustainability, are there to be taken advantage of and there to be used. But it requires us as designers to engage, because otherwise if we don't set out the sort of position from the beginning of projects, it's very, very difficult for projects to then navigate their way through to a prefabricated outcome if the project hasn't been set up in that way at the beginning. The benefits, it's safer. People working in factories is safer. Our sites are still dangerous. It's inspiring for young people. The sort of digitally enabled manufacturing future is much more interesting to people than carrying bricks around on a muddy site. We get higher quality buildings. It's more predictable from an investment perspective, and it's much less wasteful. For us as designers, and I'm not going to go into this slide in more detail, but basically for us as designers, we also spend a lot less time on the building projects than we would under a traditional contract. So it's not only beneficial to the end user who gets the building earlier, it's not only beneficial to the client who gets the building more quickly, it's beneficial to us, the designers, and enables us to build a workload, build our projects more quickly. In research that we've done, it suggests that we're saving about 40% of embodied CO2 compared to traditional in situ reinforced concrete frames, which is how the majority of buildings, certainly apartment buildings, are built in the UK currently. And given that we're pretty good now dealing with operational carbon emissions, the embodied carbon emissions of projects is the next big thing. And you know, we expect, we hope that this will come into regulation in the near future. It's already part of the intended London plan, which is a sort of a signal really to the sector to sort of start getting our house in order. So you know, we see prefabrication as being a major boost to all of this. In our projects, we've saved up to 50% of time compared to a traditional program, which is an enormous saving when you think of, say, the rental income from a building. Getting an extra year of that rental income, for example, can be up to 10 or 15% of a project's value. So even if prefabrication added 1 to 5% of project costs, the fact that you can get rental income a year earlier would more than pay for that. So you know, the advantages are pretty direct and pretty obvious. And for somebody who is doing you know, larger scale projects, the advantages become even more obvious and direct. So many of our clients who have started out being skeptical about this have now taken on the idea of prefabrication as being a core business practice for them. And 2 of them are considering setting up their own production facilities so that they can take over production from the contracting industry. So I don't think we need a sort of a clearer demonstration of the fact that it's a pretty good idea than that. And to date, we've built about 6,000 homes, units, student accommodation spaces, hotel bedrooms, and so on, and including the tallest prefabricated building in the world, which is currently completing in Croydon. And this sort of demonstrates the spectrum of projects that can be used. So the technology has now come to the point where it's mature and ready for large-scale adoption. But what is missing is a pipeline of demand from clients, because production facilities cannot behave like a contractor and grow and shrink in order to meet a fluctuating supply and demand. They really need a pipeline of demand. And to illustrate the sort of end-to-end process, we started working on this project in 2015, and it opened in August 2018. So you know, a very, very quick project process. And this illustrates the sort of variety of spaces that we've built in many of our buildings, all of which came from factories and all of which were fully complete inside. So it's not as though it restricts the design process or the brief, but you know, particularly for housing and cellular buildings, it sort of seems to us to be a bit of a no-brainer. So I'm going to stop at that point. I suppose, other than to say that in digital terms, you know, what is necessary again is a design sector which is capable of feeding the supply chain with digital information, which enables all this to happen. So I see the sort of digital data processes as being the sort of oil that or the lubricant which enables all of this to happen. Without it, it's still going to happen, but it's going to happen much more slowly and less effectively.
Okay, thank you so much, Rory. That's really interesting, and I think some points about the client's role we may well come back to, but it's really interesting for you to hear you say that there are 2 of your clients that are considering setting up their own manufacturing facilities just to ensure that this is done. So That's something maybe we can come back to. Right, now we're going to go over to Matthew Marsden at Arcadis. He can share his screen, but he can't share his webcam, unfortunately. So Matthew, I'm going to make you a presenter, and hopefully you'll be able to share your screen.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, that should
Sorry
be
about
now.
this, it seems to hate my Mac. There we go.
Here we go.
Okay, lovely.
Great.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matthew Marsden, UK Sector Director for Manufacturing and Technology at Arcadis. I'm a newbie. I've not quite done my 3 months yet, but before I was at WSP, where I founded the Smart Places practice. And I've been really lucky in my career so far to work on some really cool technology projects in the built environment. If that's 22 Bishopsgate here in London, the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco, or the dock in Dublin. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about the sort of value of having a smart or intelligent building and the kind of green angle on that through some things that I've kind of picked up along the way. To start with, I think I'd like to talk about expectations, actually. We have come to sort of see that digital has changed what we kind of want from things. And I think the best way to see this is through how banks have had to compete in the past. Let's say it was TSB, Barclays, Santander, whoever, competing against each other for kind of wallet share of folks, if that's through product, the interest rate they offered. But then all of a sudden we had players enter the market which then competed with them experientially. If that's Apple, where I don't even need to use my bank's hardware now to make a payment, or PayPal that lets me send money for free to anywhere in the world, or Monzo doesn't even have a branch, never mind a phone number I can ring, but the experience I get on an app is so good that I'm happy to accept that. And then if you think about, Amazon can get me a trampoline this afternoon, but it takes 5 working days for Barclays to get me a new debit card, or Netflix knows what I want to watch next, but HSBC might be sending me a leaflet about a loan I don't want. It has fundamentally changed our expectations as to the sorts of services that we see. And I think the built environment will be going through the exact same challenges that banks have recently faced, and particularly around energy. And I'm seeing that from at least the conversations I'm having with my clients is that net zero is really high of the agenda. And we think that one of the best ways to start tackling it for, in particular, existing assets is around using some smart buildings technology. Next, if I think about some of the drivers to value, the C-suite essentially want to increase their revenues or reduce their costs. And as designers of the built environment, that is certainly something we can help with. In terms of increasing revenues, there's a piece there around how the technology can help with productivity leakage, which are all the things in a day that add up that stop you from doing something useful. If that's the Wi-Fi dropping, having to wait for the lift, the doorbell going now we're at home, these are all things that you can measure with technology and start to address through some targeted measures. Or if it's about using technology to get people to work together and collaborate, knowing when people are free for a particular chat, or quick, find me all the marketing experts, it's a way to bring people together a lot faster. Or it being around increased talent attraction and retention, particularly from the example we heard earlier on the Edge. That was so important for Deloitte in terms of kickstarting Deloitte Digital and attracting the right sort of people that they needed. In terms of reducing costs, we've also seen from things like the WELL standard that if you implement it properly, you're supposed to have a 28% reduction in your sick days, which is about 1 day per person per year in the UK. And having the right sorts of sensors and access to data really helps you prove that against what you might have in your company-wide ERP. And then obviously all the things to do with reduced occupancy and service costs around space reduction, and how you might want to allow space to be divvied up differently in the future, and of course some of the utility and maintenance, which I'll come on to some of those examples later. But the business case broadly looks something like this, and this is JLL's model that I absolutely love, that basically says per square foot per year you'll spend around $3 on energy, 30 on the space that you're renting and the maintenance of it, and then 300 on the people itself. And essentially, although the energy sort of seems like a much smaller size of prize, it's something that's much easier to prove, and given some of the emphasis we've got around net zero, is certainly a first step and kind of your entry in order to move forward up that kind of value chain. Here are some examples of where I've seen these different bits of technology applied across those three buckets. So very much the heating, ventilation and air conditioning analytics down in the 3, all the way up to some intelligent lighting and some productivity leakage management up in the 300. And just to give you a bit of an example, this was a project that I did for a banking client who basically wanted to look at their fintech team and how they could increase their productivity. And the way that we defined it was over 3 different measures. Firstly, it was innovation, which is around the number of patents filed or projects sold, something that we could measure, but that the building couldn't do anything about. The second was around collaboration. The client hated the idea that he was essentially paying for rent for people to come and sit and email each other. You know, if you're in the office, get up and talk to one another. And the way that we did that was by looking at how the corporate mobile phones were moving across different Wi-Fi access points. So essentially what we found out was when teams get up and collaborate more, they actually increase their impact on innovation in that top one. And so we had data and a bit of a method to go change the bonus structure. And finally, the third one was around efficiency. It was a bit of a running joke that the facility manager at this building just couldn't get the temperature right. So as part of the workplace app that we built them, you could vote for a change in temperature. And we took the amount of time that somebody had spent on that screen, times it by their day rate, and essentially went to find the facility manager around $2,000 a day for wasting their people's time. A couple more examples for you. This is a dashboard of a product that we are rolling out at Arcadis called Buildings Intelligence, where we're able to look at all the data you've got across your portfolio. As long as we've got something in a building management system, we're able to put it through our machine learning algorithms to look for a whole set of energy conservation measures and help you prove the steps that you're taking towards net zero. So here we can see what that means in terms of plug, HVAC, lighting load, and you can kind of cut that by energy, CO2 or cost. Another example, some of the technology that I worked on in the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco basically helps you to see how your teams use the space, where I think this is really important for COVID going forward. If that's sort of contact tracing, if that's around having better desk sharing ratios or layouts, we can essentially take this data, compare it to what the building management system's doing, and go for some real kind of like live energy usage on the basis of real-time demand, which today in a building management system, we do through a lot of basically schedules and alarms. And I think one real example of where this sort of a technology helps is if we look on the left-hand side here of the graph, we can see that we've got 4 boilers that are all being used together to try and meet a particular winter set point, when in fact we've got them not set up properly. You know, with the wiring and the balancing of the pumps means that we've got them coming on and off all the time, when in fact after we had sort of resequenced the boilers, you can see that boiler 4 is on and the rest are off, and we're still able to meet set point. Now, if you look at that on your building management system, the fact is they're operating, there aren't any issues, and the right set point's being delivered, which is why they're not intelligent enough and why you need something like building intelligence to help you deal with these sorts of issues. To finish, I think there are probably a couple of key considerations that I would recommend for you when you're wanting to do this sort of a thing. It's about firstly having the right place to put all your data in the form of a platform. It's about having your data sort of named correctly so it's easy to deal with using a standard called Haystack. And if you're feeling fancy, a meta structure called Brick. And then finally, considering how you're going to deal with security using something called MUD, Manufacturer Usage Descriptions. And that ensures that you don't have something like a fan core unit doing things on a network that it shouldn't be. So with those 3 things, you've got the start of a recipe to start looking at how you can move towards net zero operations within your building. Thanks very much.
Brilliant, thank you so much. That was you covered a lot of ground there, I think, Matthew. So I'm sure we will want to come back to some of those points, and definitely I've got some questions, but it's something that maybe we can come back to and discuss all together. So for now, I'm going to go to Philip Radcliffe, and let me just see if I can let him share his screen, because unfortunately we can't get his webcam to display. But Phil, are you there? Let's just see. You may have your mic switched off, Philip. Let's just see.
The curse
right.
of the Mac again.
Brilliant. Are you? Oh no, that's Matthew speaking
No,
now.
Matthew.
Oh, hi Matthew. Sorry, I'm just trying to get.
Yeah, there we
here
go. There we go. Hopefully you can see that now. Thanks, Chloe.
Wonderful.
Can you hear
Yes.
me okay?
I can hear you fine, and you just need to pop it into present mode, and away you go. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. And thanks, Chloe, for that. And to the three other gentlemen. Yeah, smarter and greener. So yeah, Phil Ratcliffe from Dresden Summer. I think one of the things we heard is that we're talking about buildings, but also just as Andrew said, it's not just about individual buildings. I think it's all about the setting in a city or in a community. So we're very keen to be looking at buildings in their entirety. And I think one of the most successful places that's done this is Singapore. So we've heard about what Google might be doing up in Canada, but Singapore as a state and as one large city in effect really do have the vision around connecting all their attributes from mobility to generation to usage to offices and to residential. So thinking about it in its entirety is really in the success of between smart and design and building. But we are talking about one building, and one of the buildings that we know very well is over in Germany, which is Cube Berlin. So some of you may have heard of this, sitting there to the left-hand side of the station, right in the heart of Berlin. Cube is renowned for being one of the smartest buildings in the world at the moment. And it does that through a number of things, not only through exemplar design, both interior and exterior, and by its location. But one of the things that are heart of it, in terms of its initial concept and initial design, was to think of it based on some of the attributes of our own human bodies, really. So it's not just looking at the skeleton and the frame and the facade and the skin, but really thinking about the network. What makes it all work, bringing these things together? A lot of the technologies that we're seeing and hearing of in building and in construction, some of it's been around for some time, but actually linking it all together via a network has been one of the essential successes of Cube Berlin. But the main attribute is really the brain, the function within the building that really links all these things together. As we've heard before, it's not just around grabbing the data. We all know that everywhere now is producing masses of data, but it's also using it in a meaningful way. And that's just not producing dashboards, because almost by their very nature, dashboards are historic. It's really thinking about predictability. And that's really the key, both to supporting buildings as assets, but also cities and communities as well. So the brain is the real clever part to a building like Cube Berlin. What we've also seen, as Cube is an office, is the old models where the layouts are there, but rarely are offices fully utilized. We've probably all seen via Leesman or other post-occupancy surveys that actually, 60–65% of desks are only ever occupied at any one time. And then if you take the Monday and Friday aspect as well, that can drop to below 40%. So being able to know what's going on, as we also saw of Salesforce in California, but also looking at where that high usage is, where we can challenge either the facility management service, but also in the COVID environment as well. Lots of people are working in teams, where we can drive the teams in terms of their wayfinding, so that again, we're keeping people safe distances and also linking them together to see where that building usage is. So using the data that the beacons provide is providing that dynamic environment. But also as well, what we're also finding, again, in the COVID situation, is that many buildings are nowhere near fully utilized, if not even half. So really, why target all the services in terms of cost in use on those floors that aren't being used? So being able to target that, Cube Berlin has the ability to close off floors or to significantly reduce the air capacity on each floors, so that they're really targeting it and making sure that from an energy consumption point of view, it's only really where it's needed in time. Also, then it has the option of and the capability of actually producing its own power and exporting this as well. So the future as well is not just individual buildings, but exporting to the wider grid where there's that capability. And obviously, as we heard about Tesla very early on, but battery capabilities are growing day by day, and actually exporting the power to the grid and sharing it across wider networks is also one of the big futures, where we see buildings as part of a whole network there. This is an example of Bligh Street in Sydney. We're talking about examples of predictability, where it can also look at what's coming in terms of the weather and how it can prepare itself for that. So again, it's not just thinking about what it's doing at the time or what it has been doing, but it's also what's coming. And predictability for the data is absolutely essential and a big success we're seeing. And again, talking about energy in terms of what buildings and functions can produce, is looking at ultimately over an annual cycle where they're plus energy cases. So where they're able to produce energy and share them. And these make these business cases for a lot of these facilities within modern buildings, makes the business case write itself. So plus energy is a major success for the cleverest of the buildings. Linking then Cube Berlin and others into the manufacture, and also taking the Rolls-Royce example, where they're also the equipment in the buildings are being shared with their manufacturers. So again, not only are they seeing what's going on, but they're also able to predict things, whether they can see trends, and also get to support these equipment classes before they fail, hopefully. So again, it's just about sending the data and providing better information. And then where these items are in terms of seamless moving around the building through keyless entry, through wayfinding. We've seen the thing about dynamic energy and also delivery of parcels. All of these things are not overwhelming in themselves, but the real trick is to bring them all together. So waste, elevators, and particularly charging, mobility. Well, Cube Berlin is very successful as is using its network to bring all these things together, and to use this to the benefit not only of the building occupiers, but also the building owners and the property management and facility management teams. So getting the brain working well could be the benefit of everybody. What we're also seeing, as we mentioned before, is this ability to be able to export. So instead of being consumers, they're prosumers. Battery storage is critical to this, but also as well, there's the opportunity of monetizing this through blockchain and other financial mechanisms. So again, the communities then start to pay back to themselves rather than just be costs and overhead. And one of the best ways to get to using less carbon, particularly embedded carbon, which is one of the bigger uses in construction, is not build it at all. And in this example, Cube Berlin, actually through its smart technologies and efficiency, managed to reduce a significant height of the building, which it would normally have done using older technologies. So again, it was able to reduce itself, and therefore avoided all this embedded carbon that a normal traditional construction may well have taken it to. And also the circular economy, a massive contributor to how we're going to get to zero carbon. Is using the right materials again and again. So it's not just digitization, but it's also thinking about what we use and how we use it. And again, the path to zero carbon is driven by digitization without a doubt, and cost in use and being smart about how you use your buildings, but really getting down over to the right there in terms of the circular economy really takes not only the embodied carbon down, but also really looks to challenge the operational carbon. But why do we build these buildings, particularly something like Cube and maybe Salesforce and some of the other ones that we've heard? And it's really for us as people. We're in there, we're working. One of the workplace holy grails for many years was making these workplaces to make you more productive. Now that's very difficult to prove in many ways. And I think Matthew and I have found that today, just trying to get our webcams working. Where technology, we probably spent 20 minutes prior to this call trying to do that. So you could argue really how productive is that? So actually where smart can really help is really not so much making us productive, but taking away the barriers to make you unproductive. Because every way as you channel your way through a building here, you've got many interactions and many capabilities, whether it's planning your arrival, ordering your food, your coffee, your gym trip, meeting your client, having presentations. Again, I think we heard from Andrew around people wanting a desk, being able to sit and be productive, being able to book that and know it's there. So technology and the smart capabilities of buildings really helps people to be prepared, and then their productivity is then down to them. So smart technology, when it works well, really can unblock that, but it does need to work well. And I think even just today on this call, we've seen how sometimes when technology isn't joined up, and in this case, our webcams can just prove that it can make you slightly less productive. User experience just comes down to a phrase now, which is really looking at how you really connect with your building and with your company. And it just doesn't take, it's not just smart that is important for any building now. It still impresses that great design has a great role, linking company and the services and their products with their people. So we shouldn't reflect, it's not just around smart and technologies that make successful communities and buildings and workplaces. Great design has its place too. So it really needs to be attractive, particularly as we can see how the workplace may change moving forward, with more of us working remotely and then coming into the office for more structured sessions. You still want to make it attractive and give, when you're in there, the connection to the company and the brand. So why do smart? What is smart in construction? What is smart in terms of the buildings themselves? Why should they do it? Well, it's really got an advantage to funds. We're certainly seeing now the emergence of smart technical due diligences, where funds and are acquiring properties and portfolios. Not only are they looking at the actual physical asset, they're now looking at the smart readiness. So funds are looking at it as well. Investors, developers, property managers, the tenants, also the community. There's a massive aspect to smart within the community, as we're also seeing the impact of city communities with the workforce not really being present at the moment. It's very impactful on the retailers as well as the hospitality industry. So linking in smart to the community is also important. The facility management operators, those making things around the Internet of Things, and also the sustainability aspects. All of these reasons show the benefit of smart and in terms of the usability. Also, why do it? Some of these questions now are really within the C-suite or within the leadership, is how do we all get back into work and back into the office, more importantly? What are the questions that need to do it? And it's being mindful that it's not just about the office. It's also about how do we deal with all these things? Because maybe what some of us are seeing is not having that long commute into the office every day also has a huge sustainability benefit. So it's thinking things in its entirety. So smart really can help you join the dots in terms of the user experience, the HR experience, as well as changing the dynamic of the property portfolio, but also putting things in balance. Because what we've often been reading, the challenge at the moment, if you read the press, is about whether it's work from home or work from the office. And that's rarely the case. It's yin or yang. It's actually a balance between the two and providing the right work settings. And actually the technology and the smart capabilities to link us all together is going to be more important in the future. And here's an example here, just as we get towards the end, of Venlo in the Netherlands. Very healthy building, designed really to help the occupants be more productive, be healthier, be happier in the workplace as well. And at Dresden Sommer as well, at our headquarters in Stuttgart, we're building OWP 12, again, with the probably eating our own medicine here, where we're really looking at creating the healthy and happy and productive building environment. So really for us, Smarter and Greener is about the user experience, but not just on us as users. It's about the experience for everybody across all the asset classes. Thanks very much, Chloe.
Wonderful, thanks so much. And despite not having webcams, it did all work, so brilliant. Okay, so if Philip, you stop sharing your screen, and then I will bring back Andrew, Rory and myself, and and we will have Philip and Matthew in terms of audio, hopefully still with us, so we can all come back for a group discussion. Apologies if you can hear noise in my background. That is ironically a building site making a lot of noise. I'm sure it's a digitally led project, but it's rather noisy at the moment, so apologies for that. But yeah, I just thought those presentations just showed just the huge range of issues and how they are all very interconnected. It's quite hard to unpick some of that, but there were some really interesting projects that you all brought out. I just thought, just to bring it back to that, the angle that we had on this webinar, which was, in an age of COVID, what are we seeing? And I just wondered whether, as Philip mentioned, there's been a lot of mention in the press about this either or home, working from home, or a pressure to come back to the office. But from all of your experiences, have we got data showing how people are using offices differently? Is there actual hard data showing people are coming back to collaborate, and how people are already adapting office use when they do use it? I just wondered whether we could explore that for a moment, if anyone wants to jump in.
Just one point from Phil here, Chloe, would be, actually you raised two good points with this innovation and collaboration, because one of the things we've definitely heard from a number of corporate clients around the world is that their big worry is around when the workforce does get more remote from the fixed office, is these moments of innovation and collaboration. Because there's nothing better than getting together sometimes if you duly want to be spontaneous. And actually, as we've seen today, technology can be fantastic, but there's nothing better than a whiteboard in a room sometimes. So I think it's all about this balance. The fact is that to do certain tasks, yeah, actually the home office is great, and other work settings we're definitely hearing. But the one worry, whilst they might see there is a potential in the reduction of the portfolio, because they're seeing, why do we need such big offices? That's definitely a question that's being asked. There's definitely a theme around, what about this innovation and collaboration? Because we're not sure we're seeing that at the moment. And people may be still being productive for sure, but actually, are they being innovative? Are we getting that working together in a creative way? I think that's one of the challenges that we think people would want to consider. Otherwise, they're going to say, you've got to come back in again. So I think that's what we're hearing.
Rory, I can see you nodding your head. Do you think this is a bit of an issue, that we can be, bosses can be seeing their workers working really hard, potentially working much longer hours because their work is home with them and it's quite hard to escape, so you get sucked into it. They might be doing more, they might be really efficient, but not necessarily effective in the way that the company wants to be.
Yeah, I think that the challenge for us, and we've managed to maintain our sort of workload throughout the pandemic, which has been interesting, to me, but the issue we face is that issue of collaboration, and the sort of moments when you get a group of people together, often from different disciplines, who spark ideas off each other, which so far is much harder to do in Zoom or on Teams, because also it requires, paper or a whiteboard or whatever. People need to sketch ideas quickly and bounce ideas off each other. So the productivity is fine, but the kind of innovation and the ideas generation bit is the one that we struggle with. So what we're tending to do is work mostly at home, but spend a day a week in the office and try and coordinate that day in the week with particular teams or particular projects at a specific time when it's really useful to have that discussion. I mean, I wouldn't say we're kind of, we've got there yet, but we recognize that that's an issue that we have to tackle. Because otherwise, as you said, you're gonna have people being apparently productive and busy, but not necessarily being productive and busy on the right things.
Yeah, so I guess in a sense, this is an evolving situation, but the office and the workspace, it's the design of how we do that and the way we make them smart, the way we enable people to work collaboratively whilst also being safe is evolving, and the data, all of the data that you were discussing, can only help in that. Okay, fine. Well, we will move on. We've got a question that's come in from one of our listeners about saying really terrific examples of new buildings where we've seen really inspiring design and smart technology. But could the panel touch on how you could use some of that technology or reuse it with existing assets? I don't know if anyone wants to bring in I think Philip, you mentioned the circular economy. The ultimate recycling is to not knock down a building, but to reuse it.
Yeah, and it's probably one of the biggest challenges. And obviously, I'll let the colleagues on the call. Don't want to sort of hog the discussion, of course, but I think the question is probably one of the most challenging. It's far easier to design something new and integrate all the right technologies and everything like that. Anyone who's done a house refurbishment, for example, you know the challenges where you've got to completely redo your heating and all the the embedded services that you need to do if you're trying to do that. And obviously there's way more of the existing built environment than there is of the new environment. So I'm not sure that answers the question, but it just gives validity to why the question is so important in terms of being able to refresh the old stock and making it fit for purpose going forward. Because you're quite right that why create something new which is inherently resource intensive when you can repurpose something within the existing stock. But I say, didn't answer the question, I don't think necessarily, but just raised the validity of the original question.
I think some others also touched on the sort of the net zero agenda and how smart buildings can be a real driver for change. Andrew, I don't know if you wanted to come in on any of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to go back to that last question that Philip was answering there, I suppose RFM team complain about, everybody talks about new buildings and what we're going to do, but 99% of their stock is existing buildings, and they're here to stay for a long time. So how are we going to address that? Well, I suppose one example that we looked at is Wharfdale Hospital near Leeds. That was a building built about 15 years ago. There was no digital technology or whatever with that. We retrofitted a digital model, looked at all the built assets, linked those to that model, and produced it within a cloud database. Immediately, we found, analysing the building, that we could save 25% of the energy because they left lights on, left various facilities on because they felt they needed to, or they just forgot. So just by collecting data alone, and secondly, having all the data to hand. About 3 or 4 years ago, there was a fire in a hospital, and all the fire officers were asked to go around all the hospitals to look at fire dampers, etc., where they are. They immediately came to Wharfdale on an iPad, everything located, fire dampers located on the model, photographs, information when it was last maintained, everything else. It was there to hand. You knew exactly what was what. And I think the predictive maintenance part of it, which was mentioned earlier, is something that is evident there, and we can then look at schedules, look at various ways of dealing with that, plus dealing with augmented reality as part of that maintenance strategy of informing people of what to do, how to do it. So I think that's a key area. I mean, obviously we looked at the retrofit housing, but we're looking at retrofitting other buildings and updating that as well. So it's a way to reduce cost, reduce the carbon footprint of a building as such. So.
Okay, I was actually that's reminded me. There was a note I made where I can't remember which presentation it was mentioned in, but this idea of predictability rather than just looking backwards, looking forwards. And I just wondered whether any of the panel has got any kind of interesting examples of how that can be applied. So just when you were talking about how I think one of the presentations said, well, you could link the building up to weather forecasts and then prepare the building for what weather is to come. I'm assuming that means you could get the internal temperature right if you know that there's going to be a really severe cold weather event coming, but I don't know. Am I talking about the same sort of thing, or are there other ways that buildings predictability could be useful?
I think just picking up that, the Edge building in Amsterdam was designed, I think, the idea to do that. I think Deloitte had a lot of aspirations for the building, and that's one of those aspects that Edge Technologies is pushing forward. And I think they'll be pushing forward in the next building. They're looking at London Bridge, the tower there, is to actually enhance that, because there is value, obvious value with that.
Yeah, so that's what
Chloe, sorry, yeah, one of the things about predictability is us as users, right? I think Andrew showed, you know, the desire to move towards a central app where users interface with their building as well. But if you can put information in about your travel time, you can start to see how that impacts on getting to the building. You might be driving. Lots of people are really using their cars as safe bubbles at the moment, because understandably there's a reluctance. So being able to forecast, you know, how full your car park's going to be, where you're guiding people to where to park. Obviously then for the caterers in the building, how many people are coming in. So in terms of predicting that, so that they can avoid food waste, because they're not over preparing for a full population, when all the data says that, the opposite as well. So, you know, just in terms of the operators, they get a lot out of, you know, having that future data, so that they can plan accordingly, and you know, we should again avoid waste in other ways.
Sorry,
Rory,
yeah,
I just wanted to sort of chip in on the sort of energy side with in sort of neighborhoods. So the kind of interesting thing that's starting to be possible is this sort of trading of energy between people. So you have peaks during the day, perhaps, where there's a lot of energy available, and then you have troughs at night. And your batteries will help to some degree, but actually it works, the potential is for it to work much more effectively if it's on a street or a neighborhood basis, where, you know, hundreds or even thousands of people are involved in the exchange of information and energy between them. So I think there's a sort of a new type of utility that we need to add into the mix, which is sort of capable of operating at a local level. And managing the sort of peaks and troughs of energy flows. Because, you know, at the moment, our experience of dealing with sort of national utilities has been, shall we say, less than positive in this regard, because, you know, they look on zero carbon projects as more of a problem than as an opportunity. So, you know, I think there's a missing part of the puzzle that we need.
Okay, well, look, we've only got a few minutes left, so I thought maybe we could try and end on a sort of positive, forward-looking note. If I could go around the panel and ask you all what you think the most exciting potential, either piece of technology or way that we might see things evolve that could help the COVID situation. Is there anything that you think, well, this could really help people either get back to work or work from home, or just navigate in really uncertain times? Is there one thing that you think is going to help the industry with smarter buildings? I don't really know where to start with that, but anyone who wants to pile in.
Happy to take it. It's Matthew. I think just a proper piece of software to work as a platform. Once you've got that base to start from, you can add whatever technologies and use cases you need from there.
So whatever business type you are, if you just decide what platform you're going to use, is that what you mean?
Sorry?
Sorry, could you just go over that point again?
Yeah, purchase or build some kind of platform piece of software, so that you've got a starting point to put your data, so that you can build whatever you need from there.
Brilliant. That's very practical. Thank you. Philip, can I go to you?
No golden nuggets, I'm afraid, about technology, Chloe, but because one of the things I think we're finding is that the technology is often over designed, and therefore doesn't link together. So that's a bit of a health warning. I would say that nugget is us as humans and how we interact with this technology, and helping us all linking with technology, but still remain the human aspect. That's got to be the biggest challenge, I think, going forward.
Okay. All right. So, okay, this helps. Either a challenge or a sign of hope. Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as history has shown, when we're all in a crisis, there's an opportunity there as well. And I think it accelerates our thought process by need. And I think this is what's happening now. As Rory talked about DFMA, the government, all our clients are talking about that. It's tying up data, zero carbon, digital DFMA, all those things together. And I mean, even our construction teams are working remotely, where 12 months ago they never envisaged doing that. So I think that's exciting times, interesting seeing desk space still. We're not looking at desk space, it's about collaboration and about well-being, the reason to visit an office. So I think all these things are coming to the fore, and there's a need to do it. This is going to be here, I think, permanently now. I think people have decided they don't need an office, at least not 100% of desk space for offices. So I think it's an interesting time as an opportunity for all.
Great. And Rory, any final words?
Well, I think that people have made the transition remarkably quickly. You know, we went from an office of sort of four offices to 220. You know, practically within a week, and with no visible loss of productivity. So quite extraordinary, really. And we've been talking about this for years, about the potential to enable this to happen, but it took a crisis to sort of actually make it happen. So you know, it's not all bad by any means, and many of our staff have an improved work-life balance as a result. I think on the other hand, the extroverts among us want to be back and sparking off each other, whereas the introverts among us are probably happier than they've ever been. So it's not just about the business, it's about what the people's needs and how we meet them.
Okay, well, look, I think that's a great point to end on there. But finally, I should just say, if you've missed any of this or you want to go back over it, it's all available on demand on our website. I would just like to thank Philip, Matthew, Rory and Andrew for their presentations, to Dries and Summer for supporting the webinar. And thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And that's all from us. So goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.